South Africa has made an application against Israel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Aaliyah Vayez is an international relations specialist consulting in global regulatory and government affairs in London and joins us now from Cape Town. Aaliyah, thank you so much for your time. South Africa has made their stance exceptionally clear when it comes to this conflict. What do you make of this application now?
I think it's an incredible show of solidarity by South Africa. First and foremost, secondly, I think diplomatically, it is South Africa taking an incredibly foregrounding stance, which is, a show of leadership to other countries that have shown, various forms of support and solidarity with Palestine. But it's also really a move by South Africa to show the international world how, you can hold a country, not specifically individuals, which you can do through the International Criminal Court or the ICC, but how you can hold an entire country accountable for something which South Africa has very blatantly said in their application, for actions that are genocidal in character, which is the word genocide has been used in forums like the UN, like the United Nations Security Council, but this is the first time we're seeing it used, towards Israel, as a country, as a whole country, but in a way where, in a legal context, which implies direct accountability for their actions, towards Palestinians, towards the, occupied Palestinian territories. So I think South Africa has made an incredible show of support, but is also really, making a call to the rest of the international community to step up, to use international institutions, to use international, law and humanitarian law, and almost every kind of tool, diplomatic, economic, political, tool available to countries to hold Israel accountable for their actions.
And Aaliyah, what sort of significance does South Africa's move have on the immediate events unfolding in Palestine?
I think with the rising death toll of women, children, men, across the board, people still buried under the rubble, I think in the immediate sense, it is not going to change anything on the ground in Palestine right now in terms of the bombardments and the death toll, etc. But I think this is, it's a show to Palestinian people on the ground that, countries like South Africa are seeing what is happening, are acknowledging what is happening, and are seeking for more tangible means of accountability. And of course, all of this is work towards an immediate ceasefire. Strengthens calls for immediate access for humanitarian aid, everything that comes with a ceasefire. So allowing humanitarian aid in, allowing the bombardments to stop, allowing for medical access. All of these things that Palestinians on the ground desperately need. I think this South Africa's move it emboldens calls that South Africa has continued to make alongside other countries at international fora, locally, diplomatically. And as well as pressures regional actors in and around the Middle East to do the same. It pressures other countries because it says, if we can do this, what more can you do? And whether that is really just ongoing calls for a ceasefire, for humanitarian aid, also just for ongoing diplomatic pressure on not only Israel but the United States, the UK, Germany, France, Western European countries that are continuing to strengthen Israel, whether it's diplomatically or with, military or funding.
And, that was my following question to you, to say that, South Africa isn't really this big superpower country that's developed. What significance does South Africa's actions have at an international level in terms of international law and global governance?
I think the answer is multifold. First of all, South Africa, it may not be a United States or a Western European country, but it holds a lot of sway in the international realm, simply because we are a country where, arguably it was the first time the international community used the word apartheid when it came to South Africa. So we hold a lot of sway in recognizing what is apartheid, calling it out and saying to the international community, we know it when we see it because we've got first-hand experience. So I think South Africa coming out with that voice and with that recognition is something that the international community can't ignore, even if it is at a diplomatic level. Secondly, I think South Africa is a leading actor on the African continent, so I think it emboldens other African countries to do the same, as well as it is a strong and active member of the United Nations and other international fora. So I think in terms of global governance, South Africa is showing that, you don't have to be, a quote unquote superpower or a Western nation to say something, to use, international, institutions and international legal tools to kind of make a difference or to show your solidarity or to articulate your voice and your position on issues of importance. And I think that brings me to my third point is that the realm of global governance has international institutions, international legal and humanitarian principles for a reason. And in instances like this, it's South Africa is showing the world that these tools are available to states to use, if not now, when. And I think it is giving South Africa's move is giving incredible credibility to those types of international institutions and legal and humanitarian principles. I also think our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Naledi Pandor, has made increasing calls to reform the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. So I think it's this the application is simply a reiteration of that, to show that countries in the developing world, or the global South, if you'd like to call it, we need to come together with one collective voice to say that if these international institutions are not working in cases where we are seeing blatant genocide, it's time for a reform of them in order to make them work, in order to make them work for countries, and in order to make them work for civilians, like the 20,000 plus civilians that have died in Gaza.
What message is that sending when we are having these institutions have what seems to be quite contradictory implementation of their laws, where one nation can do something but others can't?
I think it's rightly so. It's sending a very wrong message to the international community, one riddled with hypocrisy, one riddled with favor towards Western nations, favor towards wrongdoing, wrong actions that blatantly violate principles that every country has signed up for, whether humanitarian or international legal principles. Which define genocide, which define war crimes, which define, what is quote unquote allowed during wartime. And I think other countries, this entire, situation since October 7th and historically since the 1948 Nakba in Palestine, has shown that, there are flaws in our international governance system, flaws that fundamentally favor others, fundamentally, allow for hypocrisy to seep through, which ultimately, result in high cost of civilian life, multiple other consequences such as starvation, death, ongoing crimes, etc. And I think it is a huge call and wake-up call to countries around the world, no matter who they are, Western or not, developed or not, to say that, nobody, if one country can do this without any form of accountability, what's stopping anybody else from doing that? And which is a really scary thought. And the second step is to say that what can we do to stop this? What can we do to make these institutions work again, to make these legal and international principles stand and have their credibility, moral or otherwise, effective again?
What can we expect to see from South Africa and other countries in terms of further expression for solidarity for Palestine? I mean, now we've had this this application to the International Court of Justice. We've had protests all over the country. We've had a categoric stance from our government as well. What more can be done?
I think South Africa at this point, if you read the 84-page document, South Africa has called for, a hearing as soon as January 2024 by the International Court of Justice to acknowledge the application South Africa has laid the charges rather, to find out what the court is going to do to launch a full-scale investigation into Israel and its actions. So I think in that sense, South Africa's first move is to continue to pressure the court to respond to its request, to act on its mandate to conduct a full-scale and transparent investigation into Israel's actions. More than that, I think South Africa's continued calls, I think it should use its existing bilateral and multilateral partnerships with countries all around the world. For example, BRICS. To bolster support for solidarity for Palestine. More than that, I think South Africa's actions are a really big call to other countries that have already shown, visible support or solidarity for Palestine, even on a diplomatic level, to step up their efforts to support South Africa's actions, to take actions of their own, whether it is, simply at a diplomatic level, at international fora like the United Nations, because no doubt South Africa's actions are going to be brought up in the United Nations General Assembly or, the next emergency meeting on Palestine. So I think other countries can rally around that or launch their own, motions, as well as to, countries to, continue exerting pressure on Israel and its supporters, like the United States, like other Western European countries. I think this is an incredible and unprecedented move by South Africa, but it is high time, and I think South Africa is leading the way in a way that is, an example to not only other African countries, but countries all around the world.
Is there any chance that with this unprecedented and bold and brave move by South Africa that it could possibly sour, at least hamper some of those relations with those other countries like the US and the United Kingdom?
I think on a level, it's a very prevalent question. I think especially when we've seen countries like the United States and the United Kingdom use, economic tools to kind of exert pressure, within existing bilateral and multilateral relationships. So, for example, reducing the principles of existing trade agreements or trade partnerships. I think there definitely is a risk of that happening to South Africa. I don't think the risk is incredibly high because, South Africa, as a country party to the United Nations, is well within its rights to launch this application with the International Court of Justice, as well as has, since October, historically it has made its support for Palestine very clear. So I don't think it's it's an entirely, new stance coming out from South Africa that it's, trade, political, diplomatic partners or friends would be surprised by, because it's in line with South Africa's diplomatic stance and foreign policy. But I think, depending on how this investigation plays out, how Israel, for example, will react, if it will react, we could see some backlash from countries like the United States and the UK.
Thank you so much for your insights and your time. That was Aaliyah Vayez, an international relations specialist consulting in global regulatory and government affairs.